Caution: this podcast contains adult language, sexual themes, and depictions of violence that some may find triggering. This podcast and its hosts are not responsible for the accuracy of the material presented, as it is strictly based on our own limited research and personal opinions. The information presented is not to be confused with actual investigative files pertaining to the cases or official court and/or law enforcement records and transcripts.
Okay, so if you're like me, you grew up watching The Parent Trap and Sister, and even The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. At some point, you were like me, and you were probably fascinated with the idea of having an identical twin. I mean, in theory, the shit sounds lit. I mean, I used to imagine having somebody to share clothes with, to share trauma with, to take tests for me. Oh, and of course, the fantastical concept of sharing telepathy with someone. Some people say the telepathy's real. Some people say the connection is not real. Either way, typically, for us non-twin having-ass people, we find ourselves only focusing on the perks of having a twin. Well, as today's story proves, there can be a much darker side to this coin. Today we're talking about the twisted, fucked up tale of the Duval twins, aka the Yoga twins. We'll find out how one of them ended up dead, and how the other ended up on trial for her sister's murder. Alright, y'all, we're gonna get started with this shit. And to say this story is bizarre would be a massive fucking understatement. Like, this shit is Harper's bizarre, it is wild, it's out of pocket. Like, I literally can't. But we have a lot of ground to cover, so we're just gonna dive the fuck in. So, our story begins in Utica, New York, with a prison doctor named John Dadow. Now, John and his wife, they gave birth to a daughter named Amy in 1976, and 2 years later, on August 23rd, 1978, they welcomed a set of blonde twin girls named Anne and Allison into the world. So, when the twins were about 5 years old, they allegedly found their mother on the kitchen floor where she had died due to a brain aneurysm. And naturally, this fucking had a traumatic ass impact on these girls and their formative years. So, as they were growing up, their dad worked a lot. He was a single dad. And they spent a lot of time on their own. So their father would spoil the shit out of them. And I'm talking spoiled from letting them drive his expensive car to giving them thousands of dollars to spend on their credit cards that he would give them so they could buy designer clothes. They were in high school with fucking designer clothes, which, wow. Now, while their sister Amy went to public school, Anne and Allison attended a private Roman Catholic school called Notre Dame. Now, in school, the twins were pretty popular, but they were also considered to be like loners. Apparently, they were so close to each other and like focused on being close to one another that they never made time for friends or dating. Now, they were cheerleaders, they did run track, they ran cross country. People knew them as the cheerleading twins. When it came to their personalities, Anne was sweet and chill, and Allison was apparently more outgoing. It's also common knowledge that they were so close that they even showered together. They did literally everything together. Now, when they graduated high school around 1996, the family moved from New York to Florida so that the girls could go to college there. Now, sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, the twins really got into yoga and they made it like their lifestyle. They were about that life. So in 2008, when they were 30 years old, the girls opened their own yoga studio in West Palm Beach called Twin Power Yoga. Now, their studio was extremely successful, and it actually was in operation from 2008 to 2014, so a really long time. And the twins had made a name for themselves, and they were more or less like local celebrities there. And this is when they were given the nickname the Yoga Twins. Now, just picture it. They had long blonde hair, they were white, they had matching Porsches with vanity plates, they lived in this super luxurious high-rise. Allegedly, they had matching dogs, and no shade, but they... when you go to look them up, they look like white chicks, like the movie White Chicks. They look like those girls. Now, they shopped in expensive boutiques and they partied at the hottest clubs, all while preaching this, like, gospel of yoga and its life-altering power and just being zen. They were so popular that one night they were at a club and they were introduced to a producer who wanted to create a reality TV show based on their lives and their yoga business. Now, he even eventually talked them into renting a bigger, nicer studio for the sake of the show. Now, unfortunately, the reality show never happened. So they were stuck with this expensive ass studio that they couldn't afford, no reality TV show. So it's not a cute era for them right now. So that's when they started to spiral like a fucking notebook. Just this is where things get interesting. Now, it's also important to know that while the twins' relationship seemed perfect on the outside, they were known to get into very sudden, very violent altercations with one another. The fights would end as quickly as they began. They were known to pull each other's hair, elbow and punch and scratch and bite one another. Now, allegedly, this behavior was especially prevalent when they got drunk. People said they became completely different humans when they fucking drank. Now, to give you some more insight, according to an interview in People magazine with Keith Weiss, a Florida chef who dated Anne for more than 6 months, he said that he witnessed explosive fights between them, which would erupt without warning and often in public places. Now, here's his quote. He said, "I got a call from Anne saying, 'Get over here now. I'm going to kill her,'" he recalled. She actually started hitting Allison with the phone, and he heard a thump, thump, thump. I'm not laughing, but he heard a thump, 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 and they were screaming at each other. So he gets to their apartment, and he said there was broken glass everywhere from wine bottles and shattered glasses. He said there was blood everywhere, and the bedroom door was falling off the hinges. Both of them were allegedly sitting on the couch when he walked in, and they were like, "Hey, how you doing?" Allison had a bruise on her face. He asked them if they were okay, and they said, like, "Yeah, like, we're fine, we're just watching a movie." Meanwhile, all around them, he said it was total destruction. He said they seemed not to know that they wanted to kill each other just minutes earlier. Now, the same guy, he also shared videos, which I've seen, that he recorded of his girlfriend, Anne, being wasted and on these drunken benders threatening to kill him. So, of course, because of the stress they were under from their finances of, starting this brand new fancy studio that they can no longer afford, they also developed a drinking problem, which, you know, this ex boyfriend had been dealing with. So in 2014, when they were 36 years old, without any notice, they shut down and abandoned their yoga studio business. Like literally, the employees went to open the studio one morning and everything was gone. So they didn't refund memberships, they just disappeared. So they packed their shit and they moved to this fancy ski town in Park City, Utah. They also changed their fucking names. Wild. So Anne became Anastasia and Allison became Alexandria, and their last name became Duval. They claim that they only changed their names because they were going to write a book and they didn't want to be associated with all the fallout from the studio in West Palm. Either way, when they got to Park City, Utah, they opened a new studio, but it wasn't a success at all. So this is when the girls both filed for bankruptcy. They each reportedly were about $150,000 in debt each. Now, 4 months later, this is when Alexandria, aka Allison, was arrested for a DUI, and her sister Anne, aka Anastasia, was arrested for interfering with police and disorderly conduct. Now, according to the report, when the police officer tried to get the keys to the vehicle, Anastasia became belligerent and threatened to throw a bottle of water on him. On their way to jail, Anastasia threatened to kill the police officer, so it was just a fucking mess. Now, in October of 2015, the police were called to their apartment in Park City because of a domestic violence incident, aka them beating the brakes off each other. Also, the next month in November, they were accused of stealing $900 from some lady they met at church. Like, the way this spiral is set up, I can't. So, after having just the shittiest year in Utah, in December of 2015, the twins, now 37 years old with new names, decide to go on a spiritual journey and they move to Maui. Now, Maui is the largest island in the state of Hawaii, and apparently it is fucking gorgeous. So, this is where the plot gets thicker than just thick. Of course, they couldn't just come in like normal. They'd start off with a bang. As soon as they got there, there's this crazy ass report that Anastasia, aka Anne, showed up at a homeless shelter claiming that she'd been robbed. She gave them a fake name and claimed that she didn't have an ID or a wallet and was demanding that the people who worked there give her money. She told them that she'd only been living in Maui for a few days and that she got separated from her twin sister, and she's telling them, "You need to give me money." And the people were like, "Bitch, that's not how this works." So she threw a full on tantrum and then vanished, leaving her bags behind. So weird. But the gag is, she wasn't homeless. She and her sister Alexandria were staying at this luxurious ass Westin Maui resort and spa. So shit is getting weird. And I'm wondering if they just didn't have a fight and she just, Alexandria threw her out. Like, I don't know what's going on. As time moves on, their first Christmas Eve in Maui comes around. And these chicks are at a restaurant and they're drinking together and eating. And they get so fucking lit and they start arguing and they're being ratchet, so they get kicked out. So, of course, they hop in their car and they drive away, but they were so drunk that they end up getting down the block and flip the car into a ditch. So, when the cops arrived, they said that the twins were literally hitting each other and screaming at each other. And they were also fighting with the restaurant owner who was outside too, because I guess it was so close. Like, he walked over when they heard the crash. He's fighting with them. They're hitting each other, and they were threatening him. The restaurant owner. They told him that they were going to have the mafia kill him. So of course they got arrested, and they got charged with terroristic threatening and disorderly conduct. Out of control. Well, this is also around the time that Anastasia met a guy named Federico Bailey, who she starts dating. He would later testify that the first day he met them, they were punching and elbowing each other. And he still stuck around, which I can't. I literally can't. So while the twins, around this exact same time, while the twins are basically a big aged episode of Bad Girls Club, their older sister, Amy, this lady got arrested for assaulting their 67-year-old wheelchair bound father. She was convicted for battering a senior, making a false report of rape, and resisting an officer. So I guess she was drunk and she was trying to make him give her $100,000. And when he said no, she literally beat the brakes off of him and off his wheelchair. He got a restraining order. There's a lot going on. Amy's back in Florida beating up the dad. Like, shit is just weird. So let's get back to the twins. They're in Maui, and this is going to take us to the inciting event of this episode. So, on May 29th, 2016, Anastasia and her boyfriend Federico decided that they were going to go camping, just the two of them. So they go to Costco to buy shit on their way, and they realize that Anastasia had Alexandra's credit card. So they go back for the twins to swap cards. And Alexandra's like, "Bitch, y'all are going to take me on this trip. Like, ain't no way y'all are going on a trip without me." So Federico's just like, "Bet, like, fine. But just know the stipulation is it's an alcohol free trip because y'all hoes get out of fucking control. So no alcohol." Well, Alexandria, she snuck alcohol into the car. So Federico found out as they were approaching the campgrounds, and he like flipped the fuck out. Like, he was super mad. So Federico is really upset. So they're at the campgrounds. He goes off to take a shit in the woods, probably a stress shit, because I'm sure these girls have given him IBS. So this is when Alexandria hops in the driver's seat, Anastasia hops in the passenger seat, and they steal this ninja's car, and they dip. Like, they literally just Grand Theft Auto dip in his car. Now, leaving this man in the fucking woods. So the twins end up driving on what's called the road to Hana. Now, the Hana Highway is a 64-mile stretch of Hawaii routes 36 and 360, which connects Kalui to the town of Hana in East Maui. And I'm sure I probably fucked that word up, so I apologize. So you have these drunk-ass women who are driving on the edge of basically a fucking huge cliff. The road to Hana is super dangerous, and it has literally 620 curves without guardrails. Now, along this drive, they allegedly picked up a girl who was hitchhiking. They had like this whole amazing kumbaya moment, talked to the girl. The girl said she was an identical twin. Then they dropped her off somewhere. Now, there's like no record of this girl, but this is just what Alexandria later said. So they picked her up, dropped her off, and then they get back on the road. Now, witnesses who were on the road, who were driving behind them and near them, saw that the car was driving erratically, and they could see two women literally slapping the shit out of each other and pulling each other's hair in the front seat. So one witness, who is like this Boy Scout leader who was driving behind them, said he could see the driver's head jerking around because the passenger was pulling her hair so violently. So he said the car then pulled off the side of the road, stopped, and then suddenly, all of a fucking sudden, it just accelerates and then takes a sharp left, sending the car flying off the mountain and down a 200-foot drop to the only area off the cliff that actually didn't have water. Like it's only rocks and boulders. Yeah. Now, there was no guardrail at the time, but they have since installed a concrete barrier. That's just how fucking dangerous this road was. So the vehicle flies off this fucking cliff, and it landed on its rear end with the front license plate up to the sky. Now, unfortunately, only one twin was airlifted to the hospital, and it was the driver, Alexandria, who was fucking fine. How wild is that? She only had scratches and like a bruised rib. She had her arm in a sling, but it wasn't broken. It was just in pain, allegedly. Now, they say the reason she survived is because she was kind of in a tight compartment between the steering wheel and the airbags. Anastasia in the passenger seat, she died instantly. Now, mind you, homeboy Federico is still at the campsite, like waiting for them to come back with his car. He ended up having to sleep there in his tent overnight, and in the morning he had to hitchhike a ride to a friend's house who gave him the fucked up news, and which he said didn't surprise him at all, but we're going to double back to that. Now, when the rescuers airlifted the, one twin from the car, and then, the other one was dead in the car, and they confirmed that, they also realized that these women were identical twins, and that they didn't have any ID on them. So they weren't sure which twin was dead and which twin had survived. So the police go to Alexandria's apartment, where her boyfriend answered the door. They told him that they needed him to come to the hospital to help them identify the twins because they'd been in an accident and one of them died. And apparently, he was completely emotionless and just stared at them with his blank ass face, which is just bizarre, right? Well, it gets more bizarre. When the police get back to the hospital, Alexandra's awake, and they go to talk to her about what happened, and she refused to talk to them. She was just silent and super defensive, and she literally asked them, like, why are you even here? And she just stared at them, completely void of emotion. So the police call their father, and they tell him that his twin daughters, had been in an accident, and that Anastasia died. Do you know what this man said? He said, if anyone should have died, it was that bitch Alexandria. Wow. Well, to make it even more wild, when they removed Anastasia's dead body from the car, they found clumps of Alexandria's hair in her hands, which backs up the testimony of the witnesses who saw them legit throwing paws, pulling hair. When the hospital took blood samples from Alexandria, the surviving twin, they found that her blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. So before we go any further, I want to double back to Federico, the guy who got ditched at the campsite. When the police talked to him, about, do you know how this could have happened? He told them that 7 days prior to the accident, Alexandria told him that she was going to kill her sister. Then she said it in the past tense and was like, I already killed my sister. But she didn't say why. So he's just like, okay, whatever. He also said he heard Alexandria tell Anastasia, like while they were like in an argument, she said, don't freak out about whatever it is they were arguing about because we're leaving the planet on the 30th. Police also learned that Anastasia and Federico had made a plan to leave Maui together without Alexandria and start their own business. And apparently she found out and was not happy about this. Okay, I keep saying this is where the story gets weirder. I'm just going to stop saying that because just know, with every fucking word I give you, it's just going to get weirder. Federico also testified that after his fucking girlfriend, Anastasia, died, after his girlfriend died, her goddamn twin sister, Alexandria, came over and he gave her a shower and washed her hair. After this shower, Alexandria proceeded to put on her dead sister's clothes and dress up like her. So the police are looking at all this weird shit. They're hearing these weird testimony, and they're like, maybe this was a murder suicide gone wrong. But they weren't sure. They still needed more proof. And then they found it. This is when they investigated the crime scene, and they saw two sets of tire marks that indicated that the vehicle accelerated, making a sharp turn to go off a cliff, but the brakes were never pressed. They were also able to recover the car's black box, which stored the data of what was happening in the car, much like that of an airplane, which I didn't realize cars had black boxes. The data showed 100% acceleration, zero braking. So, police officers also believed that Alexandra didn't just happen to stumble upon the one area of the cliff that wasn't over water, but that she intentionally found that area that she could drive off of that was directly above the only section of rocks and boulders. So this is when the Maui police concluded that the intent of the driver, Alexandria, was to kill herself and to kill her sister. So, the police go to Alexandria's house to arrest her and charge her with second-degree murder. But of course, the house is empty. The cops learn that she has booked a flight to the mainland, so they rush to the Maui airport. But, how crazy is this? The plane was grounded due to technical difficulties. So they ended up finding her in a nearby hotel. So they arrest her, and she is held in a Hawaiian jail on a $3 million bail after being charged with her sister's death. So, of course, at her preliminary hearing, she pleads not guilty. At this hearing, the judge ended up stating that they didn't have enough probable cause to hold her for a murder charge. So she's released, and she moves back to her hometown of New York. Well, in 2018, a Maui County grand jury indicted Alexandria for her sister's murder. So she is extradited. She's got to go back to fucking Maui. And of course, she pleads not guilty for a second time. It's also important to mention that she requested a bench trial, which means there's no jury and it's purely up to the decision of the judge. So Alexandria's defense attorney blames the accident, on Anastasia for pulling her hair. So basically, they said that Alexandria was being attacked and therefore can't be blamed for losing control of the vehicle. Well, they also found an accident reconstructionalist, a specialist person, who said that based on the steering chart from the black box, there was a lot of jerking back and forth of the steering wheel throughout the drive, which was not consistent with someone intentionally killing themselves. They were saying that it just seems like it was an erratic drive. She was being attacked throughout the drive, so this is just kind of what happened. Well, after some deliberation, the second judge, he also acquitted her of all charges, and she was found not guilty. So this story is just all around wild. Alexandria has only done one interview since the trial. She went on Dr. Phil in 2018, and this whole thing is fucking bizarre. I watched it, and I couldn't even. It's just very strange to watch. So basically, after that, she's just laid really low and been off the radar. I couldn't find anything about her current whereabouts, which go have a seat, relax, take a breath. You've been through a lot. I can't make a judgment call on this. I, it's just way too bizarre for me. I'd love to know what y'all think. I'm gonna ask a question in these. If you're listening on Spotify, it will say like, "What did you think of the episode?" So you can send me your thoughts are there, or you can follow our Instagram account and follow at Bitch I Can't Pod, and send me a message there about what you think about the episode and about this case. Now, in closing, I want to end this story with a line that the twins wrote in their reality TV show pitch. And it says, "Our story is a story of struggle and triumph unfolding in real time." Well, guys, I want to thank you for listening to this roller coaster of an episode. Like I said, follow the Instagram. You can follow there. You can listen to the show on Spotify, or you can listen on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. You can also listen on Amazon Music, and you can listen on Audible, which is just very cool. I also want to shout out a listener named Bridget who replied to the Spotify question I asked last week. I asked for thoughts on the Ginny Jones show episode, and she said, "You're an excellent storyteller, so I think it was great." So thank you for the positive feedback. It is much appreciated, and thank you for listening. Thank you all for listening. Feel free to send me your feedback. Let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you guys soon. All right, take care.